So, I think we have 1 minute, but if all of you don't care, we'll start a bit early. So, everyone, this is Jesse Tice. Tice, is that who you're saying?
Tice.
Tice!
Yep. Short name, funny
spelling. Click on this did not work for me. So, like I said, he comes to us from the village of Grafton. He is your city administrator. He's been city administrator, and it is now April 2024. And yeah, with that, I will.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. Again, my name is Jesse Tice. Short name, funny spelling, T-H-Y-E-S. I'm happy to be here today. And we have a situation where finance has come to me, and something we've been talking about for some time, where we are seeing a national economic trend that we feel warrants a sit down and an update to the committee of the whole. With that, I am a firm believer in not bringing forward problems without potential solutions or possible action items to look to address said concerns. That said, we are looking at a forecasted multi-year national recession. That said, we are anticipating some anticipated impacts of decreased revenues, being primarily what we see as possibly interest earnings, state shared revenues, a downtick, even though we have just seen an uptick or pending uptick in state shared revenues. Those may get rolled back once again, possibly even further to that previous balance. Permit revenues as well, with a multi-year recession, we could see permitting whereby discretionary spending starts seeing a downtick, and thus home improvements, home sales, and whatnot could see a downturn as well. We are also anticipating a stagnation of property values. This carries some significant implications for ourselves as an organization, but also the community as a whole. There would be tax rate implications, as the mathematics of calculating a tax rate to be able to levy property taxes is based on that property value. So if the property value lowers in order to collect the same amount of taxes, that rate increases. That is a potential talking point as far as how do we address that amongst ourselves as an organization, you as the policymakers, but also the community as well. Tax incremental financing districts, those are an economic development tool that the city widely uses, and those rely heavily on property valuation to drive that increment or income, if you will, within the district to create revenue to help pay for projects within that district, being improvements and whatnot, and overall effects on our organization and community. So again, what we're expecting here over the next 2 years, each of the next 2 years, a 5 to 7% reduction in anticipated revenues. Our 2023 general fund revenues are booked at $43.4 million. Looking worst case scenario being 7% decreases of what we're expecting, that would drop us by about $6 million over the course of the next 2 years. That would be a very significant revenue swing for our organization. That said, we need to be very aware of the fiscal health of our tax incremental financing districts, as well as our organization itself. We need to make sure we take into consideration the impacts on the housing stock. With stagnated property values and or recessions, we may not see people willing to look to improve upon their existing structures or purchase new homes. The construction industry may be impacted as well. These are all things we'll have to take into account as to how that impacts us as a community. But then, as I mentioned before, the tax rate implications and then the subsequent public education. We would not want the public to assume we're raising taxes because they see a higher tax rate. It would be an education about how those mathematics work, in that the levy, maybe we freeze the levy and that tax rate goes up because of the property values being lower. It is not that we are collecting more taxes or raising taxes. It is simply an explaining and education of the mathematics impacting that particular revenue source. Because Sheboygan, like just about every other community in the state of Wisconsin, we rely heavily on tax levy as our primary revenue source. With that, again, I touch on the fact that this multi-year recession that we're looking at ramping up here is going to impact us not only as an organization, but also our community. Working across the slide and I've touched on this, our fiscal health as an organization, as a municipality, our service offerings. We'll have to take a look to see what, frankly, we can afford to continue offering. Do we reallocate resources into different services or amenities? And then if this recession does in fact stay around as long as the indications show, whereby there are long-standing economic impacts and fiscal considerations for us as an organization, we will have to take a look at strategically addressing staffing needs throughout the organization. Our community, there's the various sectors, the private sector being manufacturing, retail, other business, tourism, could be impacted with lower discretionary spending because of an elongated recession. Nonprofits, we could see some of our nonprofit community partners struggling because of a recession, seeing less donations. These are things we would need to and want to consider as a municipality, as far as these are our partners in our community of Sheboygan. With that, actions and opportunities, immediate, things we need to start looking at right away considering this forecast. We'll want to take a look at, as department heads and a management team, what is our current budget status? How are we sitting with regards to the adopted budget? And then what can we do looking forward? Exploring and emphasizing alternative revenues. Are there grant opportunities out there? Are there other funding mechanisms that we can explore in the meantime to set us up in the future as we progress into this anticipated recession? Reviewing capital projects and equipment. These are big ticket items. We would look to create a priority list, and this is a collaboration deal. We want to be able to, as a staff, come to the City Council with the 2024 budget proposal with this identified priority list to help make the decision making process and budgeting process easier. If there are any tax incremental financing district closures coming up sooner rather than later, if we're in a position to close those out and see an influx of tax levy and valuation on our books as a community, that would be a financial help. Reviewing debt obligations for possible refinancing. That could have a long-term play, if you will, as far as setting us up in the future with lower interest rates, and we come out of the recession and we are paying much less interest and also saving money in the meantime. Taking a look at our current purchasing policies, we would look to begin limiting discretionary spending. Really take a keen eye as to, yes, it's budgeted. Is that truly needed right at this point in time as departments, and what can we do to move forward? And then craft an action plan so we can come to, out of this committee of the whole, circle around as staff, and then come back to the Common Council with an action plan of what we are going to look to do as an organization to face this pending financial concern. That said, short term. So you'll see my terminology here for time frame. Immediate, yep, that we know we need to get on and recognize and understand and carry out those actions. This slide and the next slide are labeled short term and long term, as we will be somewhat reactionary to these changing economic times. So I was a bit reticent to put specific timeframes on it. These will be a bit reactionary, but we need to make sure we're proactive at the end of the day as staff and management team to make sure our policymakers are in the know. That said, as I mentioned, we would look as staff to bring forward an action plan for the council to consider. The management team, we should start early on that 2024 budget collaboration. We need to sit down and take a look at those priorities and needs and wants, making sure the services and amenities that you and your departments are overseeing and carrying out, we are, to the best of our abilities, continuing to fund those. Look to move into essential purchases only instead of simply limiting discretionary spending. We would look to move into a phase of essential purchases only to, again, making sure we're maintaining that fiscal health of our organization. Refinancing possibilities, that's where we dig in a little bit deeper at this point to explore what can we do now with our existing debt. Can we secure a lower interest rate as the recession takes hold and rates tend to drop during recessions? Can we get in on some money savings up front and then set ourselves up in the long term? truly establish that capital equipment and project priority list, including those within our tax incremental financing districts. Strategically addressing vacancies among the staffing changeover within departments. Inherently, there will be change over time, and this appears that this will be an elongated recessionary type of financial climate, so we need to be a bit more strategic about staffing. We do not want to handicap any of our departments, but that said, if we could do a mid-year hire, for example, instead of a January 1 hire, if we can leverage opportunities like that, it's worth talking about. It's not the first choice, but it's worth talking about and exploring. And then continued responsible use of programmed fund balance. The city is quite healthy, thankfully, with our booked fund balance, uncommitted fund balance. That said, that's an excellent tool to have for us as we face these uncertain economic times. That said, we need to be very responsible with the use of any programmed fund balance. Looking further out, continued implementation of that action plan that I spoke of, essential purchases only, and actually taking it a step further, potential subject to review, whether it's an employee committee review or a council type of review for significant purchases. Again, the debt obligations and refinancing possibilities, that is a continued trend here, because as recessions progress, again, the rates we may see come down and more possibilities could creep up. The big ticket items, capital equipment and projects, that is absolutely something we need to continue monitoring, as well as staffing considerations. Meeting with representatives to review collective bargaining agreement terms. If this, in fact, is a long-term financial issue, we are a team here as the city of Sheboygan, as employees that are represented, non-represented. That said, I think collaboration at all levels is necessary. Whether or not there's flexibility there, not certain. There may or may not be, but at least it's worth asking the question. If not, that's okay. We retool and move forward, but again, it's worth asking the question. Closely monitoring those fund balance levels. Again, that's a tool we have, but we need to make sure we use it responsibly and appropriately. Policy considerations. This is where we as a group of management team and you as the council members would need to get creative. Do we look at policy updates such as, granted it's subject to challenge right now, but a transportation utility to help with funding roads, or simply updating fee schedules if they're out of line with nearby communities or within the area. Policy considerations should be part of the discussion as well, and then continuing to review and revise our action plan to address this economic climate. Are there any silver linings? I just put out there for the committee of the whole and our audience quite a bit of doom and gloom. It is going to be a difficult situation. Uncertain economic times, generally speaking, are. That said, I do believe there are some silver linings here for us as staff, for the policymakers, and the community as a whole. Potential refinancing, again, you see that trend, because that is a significant opportunity I believe we could leverage to better ourselves, not only now, but also well into the future. Recreational amenities and library circulation, we could see the potential for increased usage amongst the community. Maybe that's one of those policy discussions or resource discussions that we have as far as reallocating or reemphasizing those parts of our operation and community. Other possible efficiencies with regards to, do we leverage technology, or can we leverage technology, excuse me. Is there a different way of handling a certain process? The next point as well, possible collaboration or service sharing. Can we get an economy of scale with scheduling a joint training with another community, whether it be fire and EMS or public works, confined space, what have you? If there's an economies of scale we can achieve there through some service sharing and collaborations. So I do believe there are some silver linings here for us, not only as staff, but also as policymakers and community decision makers. With that, looking farther out, through this entire situation that we are anticipating to hit us here in the near future. Fiscal responsibility is priority number one for us as a management team, but also within our recommendations to you as the policymakers. Fiscal responsibility will be key. We are stewards of taxpayer dollars from top to bottom, policymakers down through every level of staff. We are stewards of that tax dollar, and therefore we need to continue taking that responsibility very seriously. With that, coordination communication will also be key. Now, these are some initial thoughts on how I could structure, as the administrator, different communication timeframes. That said, depending on the severity of the economic climate, these are absolutely subject to change. Weekly meetings, myself with the finance department, to continue monitoring the economic climate, if you will, making sure then regularly the management team and the mayor are updated, because it would be remiss of myself as the administrator to leave management team uninformed, and then the lead policymaker just making sure they are up to the point. I would leave the group with is the economy is cyclical. A recession is part of the cycle of the economy. There are ups and downs throughout history, and we have weathered everything from the Great Depression to the housing bubble pop to a worldwide pandemic. This recession will be yet another challenge. That said, I firmly believe if we stay in touch with one another and talk through the issues and make sure we communicate up to the policymakers, we can absolutely, as a staff level, as a policy level, and as a community, navigate this situation as well. With that, I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Hey, Jesse, appreciate it. Lee, is this right? Turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jesse. So there will be no questions from the audience. That was part of the setup here. So you got a few minutes before your next. Okay.
And I think Karina will take you to your next assignment.
Perfect.
Thank you. And then, yes, please fill out your forms. We'll give that a few more minutes, and we'll start the council meeting in about 4 minutes, and then turn in your sheets to Tatum. Are you taking them, or there's a box up here? So thanks, everyone. And then we'll see you back here at 4?
Yeah, 4.
Yep.
So 3:50 at the latest. It's added to that.
Yes, be here at 3:15.
So I'm scheduled. 10 minutes early.
Yeah, thank you. I just.
I know, that's what I was.
All right, it is 1:20, and I will call the first special common council meeting to order. No quote of the,
Sorry.
that I, no, it's okay.
quote.
Didn't
get
will the clerk call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderperson Ackley.
Excused.
Alderperson Decker.
Here.
Alderperson Feldy. Alderperson Flicky-Peneski. Alderperson Heidemann. Alderperson Mitchell. Alderperson Perrella.
Excused.
Alderperson Ramey. Alderperson Rust. Present. Alderperson Salazar. There are 8 present.
All right, thank you. And if, okay, we're doing the Pledge of Allegiance real quick. I know some folks are still writing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we're going to convene in closed session, but we're going to go into the room next door. So if you're out here still writing, no rush, take your time. We have one item on the agenda today is a contemplated closed session. I'll turn it over to Alder Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to convene in closed session under the exemption provided in section 19.85 sub 1 sub C Wisconsin Stats for the purpose of considering employment of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, to wit, conducting interviews for finalists for this position of city administrator and providing the director of human resources with parameters to begin negotiating with a specified candidate. The council may recess from closed session to take short breaks or to attend a presentation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk call the roll?
Doesn't seem quite.
Alderperson Decker.
Aye.
Alderperson Feldy.
Aye.
Alderperson Flicky-Peneski.
Aye.
Alderperson Heidemann. Alderperson Mitchell. Alderperson Ramey. Alderperson Rust. Alderperson Salazar.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes.
All right, we'll convene in closed session in room 305. And we have
He
assigned,
has to read all this stuff, and I'm just like, second.
we have assigned seats in there, so just look for your packets.
Okay.
Right, yes. Yes. This is, we already know.